So I'd like to share my response to the second section of Dreamland. I'm hoping that as you read this second section, you noticed a few things. It was primarily focusing on the pharmaceutical industry's negative contributions to this drug epidemic. It talked a lot about the pill industry and its effects, locations of those effects, although it eventually spread throughout the nation. And it also talked specifically about how various agencies began to realize the negative impacts of overprescribing this medication and opioids, and what they did about it. Finally, the lawsuits against primarily Purdue Pharma and the results of that lawsuit. They're still prescribing or producing the medication and marketing it, but they're taking a different stance on it. And so the first thing I'd like to talk about, I'm hoping that as you read the first chapters, you'll notice a correlation between the articles that you read the first week and this second section. In fact, they referenced a lot of the journal articles that you read the first week. So I'm not going to get into the statistics of a 2,000-year-old questions, but a lot of the statistics and the articles that they mentioned were actually articles that you read. One interesting thing that it does talk about, and we're going to be talking more about that in this second week lecture, is treatment through different medications for addiction. And methadone is not actually an effective pain reliever. So what doctors were doing was they saw that methadone remained in the bloodstream for over 24 hours. They realized that that might prevent not only cravings, but they were hoping it would prevent the same type of addiction and become more of a maintenance drug for pain relief. But in reality, it's only an effective pain reliever for about 4 hours. The problem is people then take higher dosages of it, but because it remains in the bloodstream for over 24 hours, that toxicity builds up in the bloodstream, and then overdoses occur more readily, especially if they pair methadone with other forms of the drug. So that was a big mistake, even though, good intentions, but a tragic mistake by a lot of medical doctors. Another thing that it really gets into is the effect on different individuals, all the negative effects. It gives so many examples of addiction, and Dr. Rogers was the first doctor to really deal with addicted teens, saw the rise of addicted teenagers prior to this epidemic, because this epidemic really began in pill form, and then led to heroin use. But so many more teenagers becoming addicted to opioids, and moving, to the form of black tar heroin from pills. But overdoses in young teenagers was very rare prior to prescription drugs like this. It usually happened in adults. But he was the first to both identify this, treat it, and begin to address the large numbers of teenage overdose and addiction. It gets into the locations and the centers for overprescribing, talking about pill mills, pain clinics spreading throughout Ohio, going into Kentucky, and then it also intersperses, based on a linear timeline, criminal cases. Criminal cases against Purdue Pharma, but also a lot of criminal action when there was a large Medicaid scam, billions of dollars being paid for by taxpayers because people were using their Medicaid cards to pay for prescriptions, and pills in many areas became currency. So as you recall, we talked about a comparison between basically $1 per milligram in pill form versus basically about between $20 and $40 for a bag of heroin, and the cost of a habit was far more expensive in pill form than in heroin form. However, when you think about currency, we think about a dollar bill, we think about a $5 bill, a $10 bill, a $20 bill, and here, written right on the pill, is the milligram. Using the pills as currency, you've got the number of milligrams, each equaling about $1, written right on the pill. Pills can't really be diluted or changed or cut like other drugs can. And so they really didn't change in value. And this really influenced the crime market in stolen goods and in the Medicaid scam as well. But then they get into the beginning of a few different cases against Purdue Pharma. And really the cases were about, it's called criminal misbranding. So what they were doing was basically not only saying that these drugs were not addictive, but giving training sessions and misinformation, and really based on not one study. And that's the criminal aspect of it. So here we have 2001, not that long ago. John Brownlee took the job of U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Virginia, and he was sterling Republican Party pedigree, and he was hoping to go into politics to a greater extent. He was the one who really jumped on this case to begin with, and he started with the controversial prosecution of a Roanoke doctor named Cecil Knox, who states records showed was a prolific prescriber of OxyContin. By the fall of 2006, John Brownlee was prepared to file a case of criminal misbranding against Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin. And it ends with the results of that, but in the meantime, other agencies were also looking into this matter. Christy Beagley took over as supervisor for another investigation. Things were submitted to the CDC, Center for Disease Control. She noticed that deaths as a result of this type of overdose passed car crash deaths, and that was a major statistic that called attention to this matter. Eventually, Brownlee did bring the case against Purdue Pharma. They even brought in the original person who had written the letter finding that within a hospital after surgery or for cancer or other major issues, as long as the drug and use was supervised, that they did not find many addictive results. But that was within a hospital setting, remember, and he had written that letter to the Journal. They called him to testify. He didn't understand why he was even being called. He did not realize that his letter to the medical journal was being misused and misquoted by the pharmaceutical company. So Brownlee brought this case and made a plea bargain with Purdue Pharmaceuticals that they would agree that they had committed this felony, and they wanted to ask him if he could give them some time and postpone the case, and he decided not to, and the next day they signed the plea bargain. And the interesting thing is that a number of things happened as a result of this. He did his job. He pursued this for all the right reasons, and that was the correct choice. And he won the case. And his intention was to address all of the issues that was causing the overprescribing of this medication. But the very next week he noticed that he was placed on a list to be fired. And even though later he was not fired, he spent one more year as a U.S. attorney from Western Virginia. 2008 he resigned to seek the Republican nomination for the state attorney general. Lost in a primary. Talk of future gubernatorial bid wilted. His political career stalled. Now he's in private practice. He lost a lot of support, even though he did a fantastic thing. And 9 other people were fired that were on that list. And he strongly believes that all of this is a result of the pharmaceutical companies' lobbying interests. So that's just the power of pharmaceutical companies within our own government and lobbying. They pleaded guilty to a felony count of misbranding OxyContin. To avoid federal prison sentences for its executives, the company paid $634.5 million fine, among one of the largest in pharmaceutical industry history. Drop in the bucket regarding what they were making. And 3 executives, CEO Michael Friedman, General Counsel Howard Udell, and by then departed Chief Medical Officer Dr. Paul Goldenheim, paid $34.5 million of that. Each pleaded guilty to a single misdemeanor, not a big crime, not a felony, a misdemeanor of misbranding the drug. So all of these deaths, all of this addiction, all of this crime and hardship, he proved that these individuals knew exactly what they were doing. And the major executives got a slap on the wrist. Misdemeanors. In court, in July 2007, Purdue executives appeared in federal court for sentencing. Lee Nuss, the mother of a Florida man who died of an OxyContin overdose, rose to speak. "You are," she told them, "nothing more than a large corporate drug cartel." So, as you move through the first section, which really brings into focus the black tar heroin and the illegal drug syndicates, you can almost see the relationship. You can definitely see a relationship of how this addiction progressed from prescription pills to black tar heroin, how it spread throughout the United States, the people it affected. But in a way, the author is also pointing out a relationship between the way the pharmaceutical company was run as well. And it continues to be one of the most prescribed medications, and the epidemic continues to grow. All right, I will look forward to reading your responses to Dreamland as well. Thanks.